I am one of the top ballistic mains in all of Apex, currently rank 1 on PC with over 25,000 kills and number 4 on all platforms. And in this video, I'm going to be breaking down the best to worst weapons to be putting in your third slot, aka your sling. And for those who don't know, Ballistic has a passive where he has a third slot where you can put a gun which doesn't have the ability to take attachments, unless when you pop your ultimate, that third gun then gets completely buffed with all gold attachments and gets increased movement speed when running with your gun out and fast reload, which means that the guns that you put in that third slot should be carefully picked so that you can get the most use out of your abilities. Now, as you can see here, we have a tier list to visualize my breakdown. So without further ado, let's get started with this Ballistic sling weapon tier list. Now, to break the tiers down, we have S tier, which is OP, which are just guns that are quite overpowered in the sling and are absolutely amazing. Then we have A tier, which are just reliable guns that go in the sling, which will never fail you. B tier are alright sling weapons, but they'll most likely get replaced with if I pick up any A or S tier weapon. And C tier are just like, I'll just flat out refuse to put it in the sling. They just don't really work with Ballistic's playstyle, or they don't really get anything out of being all gold anyway. And then D tier is just the tier for the weapons like care package weapons that can't even go in the sling in the first place. Now, it's important to note when I'm breaking down this tier list that I will be primarily thinking about guns that get a buff when all gold. I'm not really thinking about them just being a gun in the third slot that you can use all the time, because if you guys have watched my ballistic guide, which if you haven't, there'll be a link in the description too, I do give you guys the advice of not using your third slot outside of your ult because it's a bad habit to need 3 guns to win a gunfight. I choose my third gun carefully so it's a weapon that actually gets a buff when it's fully maxed out, and along with the ballistic buffs just makes the fight overall a lot easier and just provides me with an advantage in a fight. So you'll be able to see in this video that I choose my third weapon based on what they're like when I'm in my ult. Okay, first up is the Havoc. Now the Havoc just goes straight into S tier because the Havoc, for those who don't know, when you pop your ult and you have a Havoc, it comes turbocharged, fully maxed out golden Havoc with fast reload, is incredibly powerful. You are an absolute turret. Now I recommend with Ballistic that you're using your ult when you're pushing. The Havoc is really good when you're kind of starting out a fight and you want to be aggressive. You pop your ult, do some damage from far, and then you can just continue to push with the Havoc because even up close it's an absolute beast. Next is the Nemesis. Now I'm actually going to put the Nemesis in C tier because it doesn't actually really gain anything by being all gold. It doesn't get really any unique buffs. It doesn't even come fully charged when you're in your ult. I think it's a good gun, but I think it's better reserved for your primary or secondary slot. It doesn't really get anything by being all gold. I think there are better weapons that you really can be putting in your third slot, and you'll see a kind of a common theme regarding ARs and Ballistic sling throughout this tier list. I'm not really the biggest fan of it, so I really don't think the Nemesis works in the sling at all. If it came fully charged, I genuinely think I'd probably put the Nemesis in B or even A tier, because the hip fire isn't the worst up close, which means that if it did come buff, then you can kind of use it that medium and close range, which is where Ballistic shines. But without that, it just really don't get any buffs from it at all, so that's why it's in C tier. Next is the Vault. Now, the Vault is just super reliable. It's probably one of, if not my most used SMG this season. The Vault itself is absolutely insane, accompanied by the fast reload. And the Vault already has quite a quick reload time as it is. Ballistic's fast reload on top of that just makes it super fun to use, especially up close. Like, you can reload that gun in someone's face and literally take no punishment from it whatsoever. Next is the Devotion. Now, the Devotion honestly goes in B tier. The Devotion is not too bad in the sling. It does get the turbo, and a fully maxed LMG with the fast reload is absolutely incredible. The Devotion has quite a strong recoil pattern. You know, up close and personal, it's not the greatest. You know, it's not bad at medium ranges, but like up close and personal, there are just a lot of better gun choices, so it is actually a solid choice for the sling. If you do like the Devotion though, I would recommend giving it a try. Like I said, it's by no means bad in the sling at all. I just think there are better choices. Now, as of Season 18, the L-Star is in the Crafter, so we'll just put that straight in D tier. And the Triple Take goes in C tier because it's a long range, doesn't really fit Ballistic's playstyle, doesn't really get anything from being fully maxed out at all. You know, if you want to use a Triple Take, it's, like I said, better for the primary or secondary slot. Now, the Flatline goes in B tier because it's not actually a bad choice, but I prefer a lot more guns. You know, the recent hipfire nerf to ARs kind of made the Flatline a lot worse close range. Don't get me wrong, the Flatline is still a beast, but when it comes to being a fully maxed out Flatline, it is good medium range, don't get me wrong, but then apart from that, like, you don't really get much from it. Some people might like it, but my general opinion of it is it's okay in the third slot, but there are a lot better weapons. The car SMG just goes straight next to the Vault. It's probably up there. I'd probably use use these two about as much as each other. The Car and the Volt are absolutely insane and super reliable because they're fundamentally just very good guns, and the maxed out version of these guns just make them absolutely incredible and super reliable for that third slot. Now the Prowler is a D tier gun just because it can't go in the Sling at the minute because it is currently in the care package weapon, but if you guys would like to know where it would have gone prior to being in the care package, it probably would have gone like B tier because the Prowler was very good, but it's a burst SMG, and I just preferred the fully auto SMGs for that third slot because I felt like I could output a lot more damage a lot more consistently with those guns. But I would put it in the third slot if I didn't find any of the S or A tier guns, so it probably would have gone top of the B tier list in my opinion. Rampage goes in S tier. It's just absolutely incredible. The fast reload of an LMG, on top of the fact that the Rampage comes charged. Now, if the Rampage didn't come charged when you pop your Ballistical, it probably wouldn't even be anywhere near A tier. The fact that you get it charged and you can do things like break down doors, you get the incredibly fast fire rate of a charged Rampage, just makes it an incredibly good gun to use. Now, I guess it does kind of have a bit of a quick life because obviously you shoot it, that charge goes and goes and goes. If you have another thermite in your inventory, you can actually just charge it up again. The Rampage, especially in rank, is super reliable and useful in fights because you can just start out your fights with it if you want when you plan on getting aggressive, and then you can also just use it in people's face because you have such a large mag size that you can just push people and you've got plenty of bullets to miss if you miss any at all. 30-30 just goes in C tier because again it doesn't really fit the ballistic playstyle. It's a long range gun, better suited to the first or second slot, doesn't really gain anything by being in the Sling. Now the R301 is going in reliable. Now I talked a little bit about the flatline being an AR and the hip fire spread and things like that. Now, the R3 is one that I've experimented with recently, and the R3 is actually super reliable in that third slot because the hip fire I actually feel like is a little bit easier to control close range with Ballistic'S buffs. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's just me. Again, this is my tier list, so this is sort of my opinion for you guys to kind of look at. But I genuinely do like having the R3 in the third slot. I will pick it up sometimes. It's probably going to be bottom of the list, so the more that I add to A tier, you'll see it probably go further and further down. But it is a solid gun because maxed out, fast reload, it is just a very good gun for the third slot. And that is probably my most unique ballistic take because I've not really seen many people talking about the R3 in the third slot. But I've experimented with it recently and I do quite like it. If you just want a W key on Ballistic, the R3 is a really good choice because you can just ult, start shooting, and then push with it. Even up close, still very reliable. The Alternator, on the other hand, goes straight into S tier. Now, for those who don't know, the Alternator this season has Disruptor rounds. Prior to the season, it probably would have been low B tier, honestly, because it's a good SMG, don't get me wrong, but it just didn't really get anything by being in the third slot. It was just a lot better choices like the R9 or the Car or the Volt at the time. But the Disruptor rounds makes it not only a very satisfying gun to use, but just a very powerful gun to use because you can just push up to people and that Alternator just shreds. It does a lot of damage. I can't recommend the Alternator enough. It's probably one of, if not my most used gun this season in the Sling. So I'm actually going to put it above the Havoc now that I'm thinking about it. And the Rampage and the Alternator are two guns that I'm only exclusively using in ranked at the minute because I am feeling very in my comfort zone with those two because when I'm pushing or being pushed in ranked, they're two very good and reliable guns to be using. So if you're interested in what guns you should be using for Ballistic in ranked, I can't recommend the Alternator and the Rampage enough. Next is the R9. Now, the R9 is just super reliable, way above the R301, probably above the Volt and the Car. Now, the R9 is just a super good SMG, even after the nerf. All the ballistic buffs just make it a super solid choice for the third slot. It's a very good and safe option. If you guys want to just have a super reliable gun in that third slot, I would recommend the R9. Now, the P20, now I've seen some ballistic mains like kind of swear by the P20 or really just express how much they love the P20. Now, I'm actually going to put it in B tier because I'm not a big fan of the gun in general. Even with the hammer point buff, I just don't feel like I get enough from it. Now, I have used it in the third slot to experiment, and much like with another gun that you'll see later that a lot of ballistic mains swear by, I just never clicked with it. It is useful if you guys are looking to give it a try and see what it's like in the third slot. It can be good. I just prefer a lot of other weapons. I would probably say I prefer the P20 over the flatline, but that's about it. I really am not the biggest fan of the P20. Now, the Spitfire is actually going to go in high B tier. Now, recently I've been experimenting with the Spitfire. There are better choices, like the hip fire on the Spitfire isn't great, but it's still, if you can get your hip fire under control, it is a very good and solid choice, and you can start your fights from quite a way away with the Spitfire, and then just move in and absolutely shred like a turret. So the Spitfire is also a very good choice. I am probably not choosing it over a lot of the A or S tier guns, but it is a solid choice, and it's probably one I would recommend experimenting with. with. It's one that probably, if you would have asked me a couple weeks ago, would have gone in C tier, but recently, because I've been experimenting and tried to broaden my horizon on sling guns for this tier list specifically, I would actually say it is high B tier, because it is actually pretty good. Next is the G7. Now, just for the same reasons that the triple take and 30-30 are in the C tier, it just doesn't really fit Ballistic's playstyle. There's no real point to putting it in the third slot, because it's just a long range gun, and it just suits more the primary or secondary slot. These guns aren't very good pushing guns, they're not very good up close and personal, you know, they're good for medium and long range, and that's about it. Now the Kraber and the Bocek go straight into D tier because they can't go in whatsoever. The Hemlock, which is, even though it's red here, is actually not in the care package anymore, and I'm actually going to put that in B tier because fundamentally a very good weapon, but I just think it's a good weapon on its own. It doesn't actually get much by just being fully maxed out. It does have a boosted loader on it, but I don't think it stacks, at least it doesn't feel like it stacks. You don't even get like even quicker reload times with it. There are just way better guns, and honestly I'd say the Flatline is way better than the Hemlock in the third slot, just for using the Sling to push teams. Sometimes I'll put it in the third slot, but it's getting dropped very quick if I have a choice. Now the RE45, which it says here is red, but it isn't. It's currently in the crafter. It's going straight into S tier because just like with the Rampage and the Havoc and the Alternate, it has a buff when it's all gold, and that is the hammer points, which absolutely shreds up close. Now, last season, RE45 was probably in place of the Alternator because I used to love it. The fact you get Digithreat on it as well, especially in this current like bang meta, like even in pubs, there's a lot of bangalores, just makes it extremely useful. It absolutely shreds up close, and it is a very, very, very good gun for the third slot. Now, the Wingman, I'm actually going to put in high B tier, because there was a comment that someone posted regarding the Wingman being a good choice, because if you have to use your third slot outside of your ult, the Wingman is a gun that doesn't need attachments to necessarily be good. It is a good, reliable choice, and for that, actually did kind of change my mind on the Wingman. Now, I don't recommend, if you guys have watched my Ballistic guide, I actually told you guys that you shouldn't really use your third slot outside of your ultimate. It's a bad habit to get into, to need 3 guns to win a gunfight. It's useful to just use your Sling to be a gun that is buffed when all gold and buffed in his ultimate, and only really use that third gun then. But with the fact that someone mentioning that the Wingman actually can be good without attachments, and the fact that when the Wingman does have its full gold attachments, especially with the Skull Piercer, isn't a bad choice, that's why it is in B tier, because I'll probably get rid of it very quickly, but it is a solid choice if there's no other guns lying around. If it maybe had a 1x on it rather than a Digithreat, it might be higher on the list, but I'm not the biggest fan of a Wingman Digithreat, and I just think that when it comes to using the Sling to be pushing teams and being aggressive, I think auto weapons work better in the Sling than single fire. Now next is the charge rifle. Now I don't even really need to explain, it's the charge rifle. Just don't use the charge rifle, honestly. It's the charge rifle, but it's a sniper. Doesn't really work in the third slot. And so neither does the longbow. Now the longbow doesn't really get much use from being in the third slot, kind of just wasted. If you're going to use any sniper or marksman, just put it in your primary or secondary slot, because that's where I think it's best suited. Now the Sentinel I'm actually going to put in B tier, because you actually do get a fully charged Sentinel in your ultimate, which makes it quite interesting. I know some Ballistic mains have used it and had a bit of fun with it. It's a sniper, so it's a little tricky when you're trying to push aggressively, but just in terms of having fun on Ballistic, I guess it can be quite fun to pick up a Sentinel and have it be charged and try and hit some nice headshots or whatever. I don't personally use it. I don't think I've ever used it in the third slot, I can't lie, but from what I've seen, it looks quite fun, and it does have a buff in your Ballistic ultimate, so that is why I'm putting it in B tier, because it's an alright sling weapon, but it probably will get replaced if I see anything else. Now the Eva is going into reliable, and it's going above the R301 without a shadow of a doubt, because pushing someone with a fully maxed out Eva is absolutely insane, because you shoot so fast. Ballistic, you should be getting in people's faces and outputting lots of damage. The Eva does that perfectly, so I can't recommend the Eva enough. It's a very good and solid and reliable choice. I think shotguns are very underrated when it comes to Ballistic, so I would highly recommend giving the Eva a try. Now the Mastiff goes in B tier, probably goes above the Wingman, because it's a good shotgun, but it's probably the most inconsistent and low damage shotgun. A Mastiff, like fully maxed out, is good. I'm not personally a big fan of having it Digithreat on the Mastiff. It does shoot pretty quick. It does feel quite nice when those shots hit, but I just think that the likes of the PK, which I'm going to talk about in a second, are just way better choices. Now the Mozambique, I'm putting in A tier. Now I'm only doing this because I've seen other Ballistic mains absolutely swear by the Mozambique because of the hammer points. I personally don't use it, nor do I really like it. It would actually probably be in B or C tier for me, because I just personally don't use it. I don't like the gun, which is where I think my issue comes from. So even the hammer points, I just don't find that I get much use from it. I don't know if I'm just bad with it or what, but I personally do not enjoy it. But it has hammer points and can output a lot of damage, especially fully maxed out. It shoots pretty quick, and the fact you get a Digithreat kind of makes it like a bit of a wingman up close if you can hit those shots, but I overall just don't really enjoy it. But I know a lot of ballistic mains do, so I'm going to put it in A tier for those that maybe want to have an opinion on it and give it a try. I have heard it is quite reliable, even though my opinion differs. Now, the Peacekeeper goes in A tier, and it could actually potentially go in S tier because it has the Disruptor rounds, which makes it an absolute beast up close. I actually want to start using the Peacekeeper a little bit more because I'm really coming to understand how good shotguns in the third slot actually are. So you never know, if I do another tier list and Disruptor rounds are still on the PK next season, you could see the Peacekeeper in S tier because it is an incredible gun to use. And the reason it's above the Eva is because of how much damage a single shot can do now with the Disruptor round. And that is my Ballistic's Sling tier list. Now, this is very much my opinion, and I've kind of done this video so you guys know what my opinion is, and if you are looking for some recommendations or opinions on what the best weapons to put in your sling are. But again, this is all personal preference, chucked in there with a little bit of what I have seen from the community who play Ballistic. If you guys think I've ranked weapons too high or too low, I'd love to hear in the comments and have that discussion with you guys. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. Hopefully for those guys wondering what are the best weapons to put in the sling, this gun guys can give you some guidance. I appreciate you all. Thank you everyone for watching, and I shall see you in the next one. Peace out.